Hi there, and welcome to this recording where we're going to be focusing on enhancing your strategic business leader question practice by effectively debriefing and self-marking your own answers. My name is Sean Purcell, and I'm an expert ACCA tutor for strategic business leader, and I'm going to guide you through this presentation. To summarize what we're going to do in this session, I'm going to begin with reminding you of the benefits of self-marking. I'm then going to focus on 3 specific question areas on strategic business leader that students consistently perform poorly on, and then I'm going to demonstrate all of this via a marking exercise which I want you to participate in. So if we're looking at self-marking, the key benefits we're going to gain from practicing regular self-marking is it's going to help us humanize the marker. We're going to be able to empathize and relate to the marker more easily. We will hopefully look at our answer and try and objectively observe what would a marker think about this answer. It's going to help us understand the mindset of the examiner and why they created tasks the way that they did, and how professional skills marks connect with these task requirements. And hopefully it's going to change the way you present your answers forever. And you're, as a result, going to structure them much better. You're going to focus on marks much more effectively and much more likely pass your exam. Before we get stuck into the marking exercise, I'd just like to briefly remind you of the information sources you can use for Strategic Business Leader to help you understand marking schemes. The first thing you can look at would be the ACCA published answers. But remember, these are much longer than would be required to be done by students in the real exam. And they are designed to also have a tutorial purpose and to help with student learning. So don't think you have to present an answer in the length which the official answers are often presented. Examiner reports are also an excellent insight as to where students could have done better. And finally, I would encourage you to look at ACCA approved content, where these content providers with their exam kits add extra tutorial chips often to ACCA answers. The 3 specific question areas that I'd like to draw your attention to would be those questions where students are very vulnerable to losing marks because they don't answer the question properly. I'm going to look at questions which involve referencing calculations. And finally, I'm going to look at questions which involve the use of slides. So, addressing the first area where there is poor interpretation of a task, what many students do is that they let themselves down by not reading the question properly. It's really important when you're reading the tasks to look out for the following. Firstly, what verb is being used? For example, does it say evaluate? And if so, you'd be expected to give 2 sides to the argument and not just one. Does it say advantages and disadvantages? Or does it just say advantages? This is quite a common error, as many students will study advantages and disadvantages of a particular issue when they're doing their study, and then in the exam room they just repeat them regardless of what the actual task requirement says. So watch out for that one. Watch out for the rule of and. This is another common mistake, as many students in the pressure of the exam hall fail to see the and word. The and word effectively splits the question in half, and if you only answer 1/2 of the requirement, you only really can expect to get a maximum of 50% of the total marks. Also, ignore professional skills marks at your peril. It's really important to not only focus on the specific professional skills mark being tested, but also take a look at the explanatory sentence relating to where and how professional skills marks will be awarded, as these sentences also give some additional hints and tips. Essentially, you should use the professional skills mark as a lens through which you interpret your answer. For example, if you were asked to be skeptical, you'll be challenging the assumptions made in the exhibits and not accepting things at face value. The final point is that the scenario described often has parallels in real life, and if you were to relate the info in the case to a real life organization, using a little bit of lateral thinking, you'll often be able to create many more points for yourself. So try and do that. So let's now look at how these issues manifest themselves in a real exam answer. So here we are on the ACCA CBE platform, and we are going to assign ourselves a past examination question. I'm going to click on Strategic Business Leader, and I'm going to look at March 19. So here we have March 19, and we're going to begin by focusing on task 4A. If you have not had a chance to review, please pause the video now and review the question and review the answers. So here you can see we're asked to describe the benefits of introducing a customer database management system, including the loyalty scheme for smartwear. Only 6 marks, so that's obviously going to influence how you manage your time and how much you say. And just to demonstrate what I was saying earlier about professional skills marks, where the accompanying sentence gives a lot of hints, here it says they're available for commercial acumen by demonstrating awareness of the business and wider external factors impacting on the decision to implement the CDMS, the Customer Database Management System. So there's your question. Now we are going to have a look at an answer which I am going to get you to mark. So here we have the answer that was published on the left-hand side, and on the right we have a sample answer which I would like you to mark. So I'd like you, having now read the question and the ACCA official answer, to read this sample answer and decide how many marks you're going to give it. So pause this video at this point. You may have noticed that when marking SBL, unlike some of the other technical papers, SBL does not give a very specific marking scheme. However, advice given to SBL markers is that there are generally up to 2 marks for each well-developed point. And some people might say, well, what do you mean by a well-developed point? And generally, this means we answer the requirements in the task for up to a mark, and then if we were to follow through with why the point we've made is relevant, what's the consequence of it, what's the benefit, then we can get an additional mark, making up to 2 marks. My advice would be to try to keep a balance between your points, and you can see that the official answer here on the left doesn't have a balance between each of those points, but remember that I said the official answer isn't an expectation of what a student should do in the real exam, but serves for tutorial and educational purposes as well. But I would like to, at least have the white space. This answer I've asked you to mark has some white space. I think the other additional thing I would encourage would be maybe the use of a subheading. That always looks good. The other thing I would be encouraging you, if you were the person writing the answer in the exam, would be to try a little bit of lateral thinking here. And if we think of the situation, what we've got is a retailer who's considering setting up a database system for marketing and also interested in how loyalty could be achieved. And I just wonder if you could have found any parallels in real life here. To me, it could be paralleled with something like the supermarket Tesco with its club card, and that rewards regular customers with club card points. And in order to get more club card points, they need to spend more money in store. And there's benefits with those points with money off shopping. Also, you might wonder, why does Tesco send you vouchers through the post for things that you find attractive? Well, hopefully you can work out that the database marketing system that Tesco has identifies what you shop for and what you like, and therefore encourages you to buy more by sending you special vouchers. So, I would be taking in that info and I would be then adapting it into the scenario of smartware. So let's have a look at the answer and how many marks would we give it. If we look at the first point, it says customer database management system can prove to be a very useful software addition. Okay, but why? When you have all your customers on a database, it enables you to understand where they live and how old they are. So yeah, that's true, but it's not really answering the question of the benefits of knowing where they live. What will that bring? And really, I think if you were to have any chance of getting a mark on this point, you would need to follow through and explain your point maybe with an example. So that point is going to get 0. The second point talks about a customer database management system could be linked to Smartware's retail outlets via an EPOS system. So yeah, good knowledge there. EPOS is an electronic point of sale. That's the beep that you hear at checkouts and stores information of sales onto a database. This should help target customers, and marketing campaigns could be segmented to different customer segments. A loyalty system could give customer points. So there is some good points there, but it doesn't really ask about how the system would be set up, but what are the benefits. I think I understand what the candidate means about loyalty points, but I would like a more clear explanation. Again, use an example to make it clear. And so it's not really that well explained, but I think it does show some knowledge of retail systems and marketing. So for that, I'm just going to give a 1, but the candidate obviously had a lot of knowledge. Had they just made it a little clearer, I mean, there's could have been a whole couple of marks if they went into some depth about the loyalty system, and talking about having a loyalty system could stop Smartware customers going to other retailers, and just say a little bit. I mean, there's potentially 4 points to be earned in what the candidate has said there, but because it's confused, because it's muddled, I'm really only able to give it 1 mark. The next point says the main drawbacks, however, would be that to invest in such a system would require significant investment in IT systems, which may impact on cash flow, and it also is not clear whether there are sufficient internal resources to help in the implementation of such a system. So that's all very true, but it talks about drawbacks, and they were not asked. If it did ask about drawbacks, they would be very valid things to say, but the question asks for advantages, benefits. So unfortunately, I'm going to give that a 0. It then finishes with a point. Overall, I think their introduction will prove to be beneficial and leads to lots of commercial advantages. Okay, it doesn't say why. If it had said why, I would give it a mark. Yep. So really, I'm thinking that for that, I can't give it a mark, and you're going to get 0 for that as well. Okay. In terms of professional skills marks, commercial acumen was what was being awarded, and I don't really think the candidate has been looking through the lens of commercial acumen to try to gain any professional skills marks here, and it wouldn't be enough to simply say it will provide commercial benefit. So I would have to say that from a professional skills marks perspective, they're going to get 0 here as well, because there's not really being any commercial acumen points made. It's clear to me that this candidate obviously had some knowledge, but they did not develop their points very well. They did not look at the question through the lens of commercial acumen, and sadly, they only scored 1 out of a maximum of 6. So, yeah, learn from that. The key thing that was demonstrated was an inability to break down the requirements carefully. They spent time talking about disadvantages. These weren't asked for. They got a little bit jumbled in their second point about linking it to an EPOS system, which, to be honest, that point I could see being developed into up to 4 marks. You could talk about how the database could record sales. This could give information with regards to what were the best-selling items, in which colors, which would maybe help future stocking of ranges. And then you could also talk about the fact that you understand which products sell best in which stores would enable marketing campaigns to be targeted accordingly, like we said on the Tesco Club Card example. So a shame, but an example how even a good looking answer scores very little marks if it doesn't follow the requirements. Let's now look at the second problem area for SBL students, and that's concerned with not using the numbers correctly. Unlike at lower levels, SBL is unlikely to give you any marks for just doing the numbers. You've proved your ability in this area in earlier exams, and to gain marks, you must add value by giving your perspective on what they say. And the linkage and meaning of calculations is what markers are looking for. Also, remember that if you misinterpret the numbers but then draw appropriate conclusions from erroneous calculations, markers will still give you marks based on the own figure rule. When you're looking at figures, what I would encourage you to keep thinking, to act as a catalyst, to make some comments, is so what? Why? What are they saying? Also, professional marks, as always, very, very important, and ignore professional skills mark at your peril, and numbers shouldn't be taken at face value at the strategic professional level. You should remain skeptical even if the professional skills mark is not being asked for. Skepticism. You know, as a strategic professional, you don't take numbers at face value. The other problem with numbers is that a lot of accounting students really love them, and many don't like maybe the ambiguous nature of some of SBL, and so if they get a load of numbers to calculate, it has a big impact on their time because they want to calculate every last detail, and sadly that really messes up time management. Also, try to make your calculations much quicker by using the spreadsheet functionality and bring the main salient points from your calculations into the word processing area. So we're now going to demonstrate this through a marking exercise. Still on task 4, let's now look at part B, which asks us to evaluate the marketing department's MPV analysis that supports the CDMS Customer Database Management System investment, questioning any underlying assumptions made. So you can see how that requirement of questioning any assumptions made complements the professional skills marks requirement for skepticism. And again, the accompanying section to the professional skills marks of skepticism says, displaying skepticism about the cash flow forecast used to support the proposal. So that should be where you are being most skeptical. So just to clarify, we are looking at March 19, question 4B. Please review the questions and answers and pause this video until you've done so. So in this question, we're asked to evaluate the marketing department's NPV analysis. Therefore, when you see the verb evaluate, there's an expectation that you're going to explain both sides of the argument and look at both the positive and negative aspects of what has been done. The question also then asks you to question any underlying assumptions made. This also fits in quite nicely with the professional skills marks associated with this question, which are awarded for skepticism. Remember that when you're planning your answer, you should use professional skills marks as the lens through which you interpret your question. So when we're looking at a question in which skepticism is required, we're expected to probe, question and challenge the facts as they're presented, and certainly not take them at face value. So here we have a sample answer for you to mark. It's a little longer than the previous one, so I'd like you to look at this page and maybe pause it and then have a look at the second part of the answer and pause it, and I would like you to mark it in accordance with the answers. So looking at the answer, the layout looks good. It starts with a report, and yep, that all looks nice, follows the format, acting professionally. Would we give any marks for these calculations which have been done here, I wonder? Well, I don't think any value has really been added, and for this they're just going to get 0 for all of it. So the candidate has obviously spent quite a lot of time just repeating all of this information and putting it into the answer, but it's all given in the exhibit, so there's no marks at all awarded for that. And in other calculation questions, you sometimes see someone get hold of a P&L and take it apart and do every ratio under the sun, but sadly without any relevance to the or relation to the task, it gets 0 marks. So 0 marks for that. It then says a positive NPV is achieved. Okay, that's true, but again, I think that is really just repeating information given in the case. So for that, I'm going to give another 0 as no real value added. It then goes on to say that an appropriate discount factor of 10% has been applied to reflect the time value of money during the project duration. Again, that's true, but there's not really any evaluation going on there. So again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be fair, but 0. It then says the corporation tax appears to be correctly charged against the cash flow stated, which gives confidence in the accuracy of the information. Okay, I think I'm going to give a mark for the fact that they have recognized that the corporation tax has been correctly charged. I'm not sure the end bit is worth a mark, about confidence, and it's a shame because if the candidate had added something here that corporation tax writing down allowances were potentially available and maybe should be included, you could have got an extra mark for that, but that's not stated. So I'll give them a mark, but not 2. It then goes on to say that we can see a contribute. So the other thing I like here, I love the subheadings. It just makes my ability to navigate this answer much, much easier. And the point under the subheading contribution constant over the period, we can see that the calculation in Exhibit 6 assumes a constant contribution of 22 million over the whole 5-year period. This seems unrealistic, as if CDMS investment is worthwhile, it surely will be improving sales and contribution, and therefore we would expect, well, don't worry about any spelling, but we would expect to see a rise in the contribution achieved over the period and not flat as it's presented. Under the subheading Contribution Constant over the period, we can see that the calculation in Exhibit 6 assumes a constant contribution of 22 million over the whole 5-year period. This seems unrealistic, as if the CDMS investment is worthwhile, it surely will be improving sales and contribution. So I think that's a good point, and I would give a mark for challenging the constant contribution and a further mark for following through, for saying that it seems unrealistic. So that's how you're going to get 2 marks. You talked about the first point and then you followed through with it being unrealistic. So nice. It then says it's very optimistic assumptions of earlier benefits. It's also unrealistic to expect such large contribution to be gained in the early years, especially the first year, and is likely to take time to build. I think nearly there, but not quite there. So I'm going to give it a mark for the first point, but it doesn't really follow through with a why or a so what, and therefore that point is only going to get a mark. The final point says treatment of maintenance and, sorry, not the final point, but treatment of maintenance and support cost. Next point, treatment of maintenance and support cost. Note 1 indicates that the cost of maintenance and support contract will be incurred all in the initial investment, and it's highly unlikely that a company would pay for maintenance and support all up front 5 years in advance. However, if this was to be taken into account, it is likely to make the MPV even higher and even more attractive. Well, there's no penalising for spelling mistakes, so I think they mean attractive. So what do we think about that one? Well, I'd give it 1 mark for it all being paid up front in the initial investment, and I would give it another mark for saying that actually this is, going to make it even more attractive because it would have made the MPV higher, because it would be highly unlikely that someone pays maintenance 5 years in advance, and it would likely to be paid on an annual ongoing basis. So nice, quite like that one. It then says there's a constant CDMS operating cost. It seems unrealistic that the operating cost for CDMS will be exactly the same every year, and this is therefore likely to distort the figures. Again, I'm definitely going to give you a mark for that. And to gain an extra mark, you could also have mentioned that inflation's been ignored, and that CDMS operating costs have been running quite high, considering that they're in a recession. But unfortunately, that wasn't said, so I'm going to just give you 1 mark for that. So, yep, what do I think there? I think that was a good answer. In total, they're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 marks. So good answer. But the reason it was a good answer, the layout was great. The subheadings were great. I think this might have taken quite a long time because of all of this here, which got them no marks whatsoever. In terms of professional skills marks for skepticism, again, I think it's important for you to read the exact wording, because that's how markers have to do the professional skills marks allocation. But I would certainly say that this answer was pretty skeptical, and the professional skills marks awarded would be at the higher end of the professional skills mark scale. The final area which I want to have a look at and give you some input on is the area of questions which involve slides. Most exams will ask you to present an answer in the format of slides, and unfortunately people don't get as many marks as they can on those. And the key issues that we need to be aware of on questions involving slides is it will normally ask for accompanying notes. Yep. And it must show, or you must show, clear linkage between the bullet point you would make on a slide and then the notes that you make. And you must realize that most of the marks you're going to earn on a question involving slides are going to be given for the notes. Yep. So you need to look at the marking scheme. You need to make a clear linkage with a subheading between the actual bullet point on the slide and the notes that you would make for your slide presentation in exactly the same way that you would do in the workplace when giving a slide presentation. So really, really important to make sure the notes reflect the marks and also to make sure that the notes follow on from the bullet point you've made in the slide. The other things are kind of similar to what goes on other questions, and people looking at questions involving slides, again, forget about the verb being used. So make sure that you acknowledge what the verb is saying and present accordingly. And the other usual suspect is ignoring the professional skills marks. Just because it's a slide-based answer does not mean you ignore the professional skills marks, and you need to have the correct tone to reflect the professional skills marks. And also, as said previously, look at the accompanying section explaining what the professional skills marks are going to be awarded for. To demonstrate all of this, I'm going to have a go at a marking exercise. The question which we are going to have a look at is the December 18 paper, and we're going to have a look at task 3B. So I would like you, if not familiar with it, to pause now and review the question and the answers before rejoining. So if we have a look at this question, we can see that there are 12 marks. The finance director has asked you to prepare 3 slides, 1 for each risk. So 12 marks, 3 slides. I'm thinking about 4 marks per slide. Hopefully you would be thinking the same way, and accompanying notes. So at least 3 notes if you're thinking about a mark per note, depending on how much you develop it. So an accompanying notes for the next board meeting, assessing the potential outcomes of each of the information systems risks identified by the finance director and recommending actions for each risk. 3 professional marks are given for demonstrating commercial acumen skills, but then always follow the question through in demonstrating insight and understanding of the information systems, risks and controls. And there's 3 marks for that. So 20% of your marks here on this question are for your professional skills. So let's have a look at an answer. So I would like you to mark the following answer. Here we have slide 1. So what I want you to do is just maybe look through this answer and then pause, maybe go back what each one says. Slide 1, it talks about the risk, a lack of focus on ITIS strategy outcomes, the outcome and the action, clear there. It then has for each one notes. So look at the notes. Slide 2 talks about the risk of cyber and data security breaches, makes that clear, and also has notes, and there was no answer for slide 3. So I would like you now to pause, have a think about how many marks you're going to award this, and then we'll get back. So the slide here, how many marks would we give for the slide? Well, the slide is well presented, looks good, and I'm going to give that 1 mark. Okay, as I've said, the marks on slide questions are going to be mostly awarded for the notes made. Let's now have a look at the notes. The first note says risk to long-term success of the business, which links to the slide, and it's essential that we have a clear IT focus, as that is a key source of competitive advantage within Highlight's business. And to not do so, I'm going to give them an extra mark for that. So there's 2 marks for that point. Excellent. Business opportunities could be missed by not fully exploiting IT that could be applied. There is a danger that initiatives appropriate to that business could be lost. Oh, do I give, well, I'm just going to give 1 mark for that, but it's a very strong 1 mark there. It follows through with an example. Waste resources on inefficient systems. By not having clear and considered approach to IT, they could end up investing in IT resources and initiatives that do not integrate with other systems. Correct. Leading to costly mistakes and redundant systems. I think that's a so what follow through. I'm going to give a mark for that. Now, you can see that the slide notes are probably worth 4 marks. Had I had more marks, I could have given more marks, but in fact, I think I'm maxed now at 4 marks because I've given 1 for the slide, and I'm going to have to get rid of that mark. And for the rest of this, I would have on this point here, employee and IT director. An IT director will be able to take a strategic overview and ensure all, yep, but I can't give you any more marks. There's a max. This is a great point, but I can't give you as we have maxed out. As with the next point, I'm going to give no marks for that, and because they've scored as many as they can. So what this demonstrates is the student did not really manage their time very well. If we look at slide 2, again, very well laid out, talks about the outcomes, talks about the actions, very clear, quite a lot said there again, and I would question, mark focus, but for that, they're definitely getting a mark. Let's now have a look at the notes. Vulnerable to external hacking. I'm going to give 1 mark for that. Nice point. Hopefully you did the same. Threat of virus infection. Cyber breaches are likely to expose highlight to the threat of virus infection. Yep. I'm going to give a mark for that as well. So, yeah, good. 3, but because of poor time management, slide 3 gets no marks at all. And the lesson to be learned here is 12 marks, 3 slides. You're thinking about a third, which clearly wasn't done here. I think far too much time was spent on slide 1, which had a maximum of 4 marks, but took up the majority of the students' time, which is a shame. So I hope you found that useful and have learned something. I wish you all the very best in your exams going forward.